rally, often would be said, you rally around the flag. Well, all those things are still true. Even though we may do it differently today, it's still that kind of an idea. Some of you have gone down and kissed the ground when you got home. I know you have. Just to be home. One of the sweetest memories of my first year here was I went to a Cardinals football game, the first one of the season. And to see 3,000 or 4,000 people rise to the Star-Spangled Banner and Old Glory. That was us after our 3 years, looking at another very special flag, but it was the flag of the country of Trinidad and Tobago. And they feel the same thing about their flag. The flag, militarily speaking and biblically speaking, it serves as a rallying point. At times, it lets the soldiers know where they needed. In American history, as well as in our world history, the flag has always been used in battles. It directs, it encourages. I was reading in the Old Testament how they had their banners or flags for the warfare that they practiced. And so for the soldiers that are involved in that war, it's also meaningful to them in a time of peace. For many of you that are seated today in this building, the American flag is very, very special. Very special. Amen. You've bled for it. You stood for it. And some of us who were not there, we stood behind you. We encouraged you. We supported you. I don't know a whole lot about the Marine Corps. I respect them mightily. But I do know it takes a lot of people to have one man or woman up on the line. There's a host of people that make it possible for you that are still serving, and you that served and you that will serve. It takes a host of people for that one person to be up there with that M16 or that mortar or whatever you're up there with. Or if you're piloting an aircraft, as Jim did. It takes a lot of people for you to be there at that place where a man or a woman is needed to stand up for what is right. Y'all can see where I'm going with this, but I'm still going to finish it because I'm talking about another flag. It's about the flag of Jesus. Jesus the Christ, he who hung on that cross. And if you really think about it, every picture that we've ever seen, every drawing, every painting is just a flag of what he did for us. I want to talk about what we get to do for him. It's interesting to take note of who Jesus selected to carry his flag. To carry his flag before the world. Those who would lead the charge against Satan and sin. Those early flag bearers. I want you to think with me this morning as I describe some people, because sometimes we sit or stand in a church house and we think we're little. We think we're insignificant. We think we don't have a large role to play that's important to the overall role of whatever our congregation or our nation is trying to do. I want to bring to our attention again 14 ordinary people that Jesus specifically selected because they were ordinary. Ordinary people. Our churches, houses are filled with ordinary people. From the person that's standing in the pulpit to those sitting in the elder's office, for those who are working, for those who slave all week long doing whatever they do to earn a living, our churches are full of ordinary people. But it is amazing what ordinary people can do. This congregation exemplifies that over and over and over again. This little organization here, the Church of Christ, been in this location since 1952. Not this same building, of course, but this same location. You that have visited with us today and you that don't know this, you need to know. At least 29 men who sat in these pews or whatever they had before, went on to become preachers and missionaries out of this congregation. And some of you are seated here today. Some of you wives are going to be so surprised when he says to you, I think I want to go train to be a preacher. Jim Bender sat in these pews right there taking notes on every sermon I preached. And one day he said to Becky, I want to become a preacher. People say, why would Jim want to become a preacher? He's a pilot. He's a Marine captain. Why would he want to become a preacher? Because he felt he was selected by God to carry the flag in a different place, in a different way than he was before. I don't even see him in here this morning. I'm avoiding him. I know he's right over there. It's about that flag. The original flag bearers were a motley crew. It was 12 of them, the original. 12 very ordinary men. And he specifically chose them to carry his flag to the world. They followed him as disciples, first of all. When he called Peter, James, and John and Andrew to follow him, they were just fishermen. They just became disciples. They just were disciples. Disciple means a follower. They became a follower of Jesus. Later, they would be selected from all that passel of disciples. And we know on one occasion there was at least 5,000 people there. They were selected by Christ himself to be his apostles, his ambassadors to the world. That's all an apostle is. He goes representing the king, and Jesus is our king. 4 of those men were from Sneed's Ferry. Who knows where Sneed's Ferry is? Well, they weren't from Sneed's Ferry, but it's like being from Sneed's Ferry. Sneed's Ferry is our fishing village now, which is now vacation town and where you want to go when you retire. People ask me where you want to go is Sneed's Ferry. Some people don't even say heaven start with, you know. They want to go to Sneed's Ferry, like it's heaven down there. But there was 4 ordinary fishermen. Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Just ordinary guys. But these men, they were going to do a magnificent work in their lifetime. They were going to make a difference in their world. I lost my page. I'm not going to keep secrets from you. I didn't dream about this last night when I finally went to sleep. These men chosen from the other disciples, Peter, Andrew, his brother. And by the way, it was Andrew who found Jesus first and introduced him to Peter. So you read books about Peter. How many of you read about Andrew? There would have been no Peter without Andrew. Peter, Andrew, James, and John. There was Matthew. Now, those of you who have seen the film The Chosen, you see Matthew portrayed in that film realistically. He was a hated, despised, low individual in the view of the Jewish people. You know what he did? He got in league with the Romans, who was an occupying army. He collected taxes for them. And he collected more than he was due, and he skimmed off the top. He was also kind of a thief. Matthew. He recorded the life of Jesus in the book called what? Matthew. Jesus can use you. He can use me. He can use any of us. One man couldn't make up his mind hardly. He demanded proof when the other 10 apostles said that Jesus had arisen from the dead, and they had seen him. And he said, I will not believe it until I stick my finger in the holes in his hands and thrust my hand into the hole in his side. And who is that? Thomas. But what do we call him? Doubting Thomas. He's known for one who had doubt. Who among us doesn't have doubts from time to time? God used a doubter to take the word to the world. There was one man who was important, but to his peers, that being the other disciples, he was not considered very important. And by the way, he had the same first name as James, the son of Zebedee, which was one of the elite of the apostles. And so what did he call him? James the Less. James knows he's not worth as much as the other James. But he was worth something to Jesus, and Jesus used him. Then there was one that I have friends that could play his part today. Men that I love. There was one that was called Simon. What's the rest of that? The Zealot. You know what he was? I've got to be careful now. He was a rebel. He was a zealot. He was dead set against Rome, their occupation, their taxation, and he took weapons to do business, the business of slaying Romans. He was a rebel in that particular part of the world. That's what he was. He went to war. And he was called by Jesus, a man of war. And he was called by Jesus to be a man of peace, a preacher of peace. And he did so through the gospel. God can use anybody he wants to. And then there were three that I know very little about, and you don't know much about them either because it doesn't say much about them. There was Philip. But Philip is the one when the Greeks wanted to see Jesus, it was Philip that took them to see Jesus in the book of John. It was Philip that took, not Andrew, but Thaddeus to see Jesus. It was Philip that's the reason Nathanael was taken to Jesus. Philip. Bartholomew, I don't know what he did. When you don't know, you don't know. Then there was Thaddeus. And I really don't know what he did, but he was listed with the 12. And there's one, no good traitor. Judas Iscariot. He did not have to do what he did. He chose to do what he did. You don't have to do what you do. You choose to do what you do. And he chose to deny the Lord and betray the Lord. But then there was a man, not listed in that original group of the 12, named Matthias. But you know what that man did, Jim? He traveled daily with Jesus for 3 years as get this, just a disciple. Oh, I'm down there at the church, but I'm not worth anything. They don't need me. I don't have anything to contribute. I'm just Ron. I used to be just Ron. Maybe you used to be just Ron. But when they needed an apostle to replace Judas, Matthias had the credentials. He had been with Jesus from Jesus' baptism to his resurrection. So he was qualified to be an apostle. Then God decided, Jesus decided, that they needed another apostle. Just because 12 is a round number and it sounds good, they decided 13 was needed. And so there was an individual named Saul who was dead set against Jesus Christ and all those who followed Jesus Christ. He not only did not like them, he hated them. And he was so strong in his Jewish religion that he decided his job was to slay them. And he went to work at that. And in the 7th chapter of the book of Acts, when the first Christian is killed by the mob, when Stephen was stoned, this man named Saul was holding the coats of those who were throwing the rocks, enabling them to throw better. And then he went on a rampage against the church. Got so bad in Judea, he was so successful, they gave him letters of introduction and sent him all the way into Syria, to the ancient city of Damascus, with authority to arrest and bring anybody they found that believed in Jesus, bring them back to Jerusalem for the religious courts so they could be put in prison, tortured, and often killed. But on the road to Damascus, suddenly a bright light shined around about him. He fell to the ground, stone blind, and he heard a voice saying, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And he cried out in anguish, "Who are you, Lord?" And he heard a voice say, "I'm Jesus of Nazareth, who you are persecuting." Don't you know that at that moment, Saul wanted to say, "No, no, 1,000 times no. It can't be you. I don't believe in you. I believe you were fake." But he could not deny what was gone. So he said, "What would you have me to do, Lord?" Now that would have been a great time for the Lord to say, "Saul, you don't need to do anything because you've had a miracle and now you're okay. Go your way and sin no more." But he told Saul, "You go into Damascus, finish your journey, and there's a man named Ananias, and he's going to come to you. You go and talk to Ananias." So God selected an ordinary man, Ananias, go talk to Saul. He came to Ananias in a vision, go and talk to a man named Saul who's in this certain house on a certain address. And Ananias didn't want to go. Sometimes we have an opportunity to go out in our community and talk to somebody. We really don't want to go because we're afraid. We're afraid of them. We're afraid we don't know enough. We're not wise enough. We're not tall enough nor short enough. We're just not ready to go. He said, "Lord, I know about this man. I know what he's done." And God said, "You go talk to him because he's a chosen vessel of mine, and he's going to take my name before the Gentiles," which would have been a hair raiser for the Jewish man named Ananias, "to the Gentiles and to the kings." He goes and he finds Saul. He's been blind 3 days. He hasn't eaten or drank in 3 days. He's been praying. Now, if you could, as some have said throughout history, you can pray your way into salvation, he'd already been there. He'd been 3 days intensely praying. He believed in God. He was killing people because he believed in God. But all of a sudden, he found out he was on the wrong track. And Ananias came to him, and it wasn't a long sermon, Jim, and maybe you and I could learn something from that. And also, our other preacher's not here, but you can tell him I said this. So he said to him, "Saul, why are you waiting? Or why tarriest thou?" We like it in the King James. "Why tarriest thou? Arise and be baptized and wash away your sins." And he was, and the Bible says straightway he began to proclaim the Christ, saying he really is the Christ, the Savior of the world. So, Saul, of all the apostles, he was the meanest. He was the most learned of all the apostles. We might even consider him beyond the ordinary man, because in the Jewish economy, he was head and shoulders over anyone his own age. But you know that man? He wrote 11 of the books that you hold in your hand today in the Holy Bible. From the book of Romans through the book of Philemon, and maybe, a great big maybe, Hebrews. 11 for sure. God can use any of us at any time, everywhere. There's a little book I read maybe 40 years ago, written by a brother named Jack Evans, called The Glory of the Ordinary. And it struck me at the time when I read that book, and about a week ago, that's what happens. I've served in congregations other than here. I've taught in the school of preaching. I've seen ordinary people. I had one boy that looked like a tight end in Trinidad. He could not functionally read when he came to school. But by the time 2 years was by, he had read the Bible through cover to cover, passed all his courses, and I believe he's still serving in St. John's as a preacher. Ordinary guy, just an ordinary guy. There's been ordinary guys and ordinary girls in these pews ever since we've had the pews. And for those that early on began the work that is here. And ordinary people did an amazing thing over the last few weeks. But Joyce, you and I have lived to see so many extraordinary successes in this little congregation, as Terry likes to call the biggest little church in the brotherhood. It is because of Uncle Sam and the military. We don't do so well in our community. We really don't. But we have done a marvelous job for over 70 years with and through our military members. And some of us are committed to make sure that there is a congregation for the sons and daughters of patriots who hold up their right hand and they promise to defend our way of life in this nation. And we are committed totally to make sure this congregation remains strong and doing the work of the Lord and help people understand the pleasure of serving Christ in an imperfect, sometimes almost off the chart congregation. Okay? I love you, and I'm one of you. So, what kind of a thing do I have to talk about now? Where are we? And what are we doing here? And what are we going to do? How do we do this as ordinary people? How do you and I do it as ordinary people? We do so, now here's very simple. We do so by living righteous lives before our relatives. First, particularly those children, our relatives, our friends, our neighbors, co-workers, fellow students, and fellow Christians. We must always practice who Jesus said that each of us is. Jesus said to you and to you and you and all of you and me, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And then the way he kind of put it means, go out and behave yourself so the world will see it and glorify God. We are to be, first of all, the light of the world, the salt of the earth. We are to carry or plant Jesus' banner or his flag, his soul, with his soul-saving gospel. We cannot not preach the gospel. First, it has to be in our hearts. I mean, you have to take it, and I'm as serious as I can be. We have to take it within us. And it means more than meat and potatoes. It means more than entertainment. It means more than a worldly accomplishment. It must be taken deep with our individual hearts. My heart, your heart, in my marriage especially, in my house, in the hearts of my children, in the hearts of my grandchildren, and now in the hearts of my great-grandchildren. I have to remember the challenge that Joshua threw out to the nation of Israel, which they did not follow. He says, choose you this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Young man, when you ask someone to marry you, you let it be known right now, right here, that I am the Lord's man and I'm going to be the Lord's man. And if you're not up to that, you're not the girl I'm going to marry. And when you ladies, when someone is approaching you with that, you just got to say, if you're going to live it, I am a Christian. I'm going to live as a Christian. And if you're not ready to live as a Christian, I'm going to look somewhere else for somebody else. Now, you may not like that, but I tell you what, here's another thing this congregation has done through the years. There's been many, some in here this morning, who when they did get married, they married somebody that wasn't yoked up with them in Christ. But then they studied together. Sometimes we helped them in the study. And families were joined together in Jesus. And some of those are the very families that men went on to become preachers. So, you got to take a stand is what I'm saying. You got that flag of Jesus, and you got to plant it first of all in your heart, and then in the heart of everybody that you're going to have in your family. So, all of us know our world is in turmoil. Basically, our society is all messed up. I mean, it's just flat all messed up. Things have been that way for years. And other things are being turned upside down. But I want you to remember this. When Jesus was born, the world was turned upside down. It's never been darker, blacker, or more awful than it was when Jesus was born. But Jesus and 14 men, over a period of 100 years, changed the world forever. And then those who followed them over the next 400 years continued to change the world forever. Then Satan got in and caused all the divisions that you see in our world today. So when the gospel is preached, it depends on who's preaching as to how it's preached. But God uses ordinary folks just like us. It changes the world. It has changed it in the past and will change it today. And it will change it in the future when my great-grandchildren are growing up. If we Christians carry Jesus' flag on a daily basis and we plant it firmly wherever we are, those who do not know, which I don't think there's any in this audience this morning, they're two of the most dangerous places for faith-living people. That's a college campus and a military career. Now, I love what I see and have seen all my years here. I loved it before I ever came. I loved it when I was a boy in Newport, and the Marines and sailors from Cherry Point, that's where they came to church. I saw young men, I mean, they were at church, and they were acting like Christians. I grew up with that. Here I see young men and young women that have signed up for what I believe is a great sign up for the military. It's not, everybody's not cut out for it, but I'm glad we have Christian folk in the military. But I want to tell you something. You got to tie it down and gird it up real strong if you're going to stand against what you're led to participate in. In my day, it was a beer bust. And then you get written up for getting drunk. It's an easy fix, but we ain't going to use it. So what I'm saying is, we go off to a college campus, if we're not prepared, we're going to be in big trouble spiritually. Becoming the military, if we're not prepared, chances are we could turn out bad. So, we need to remember, and I'm going to leave you this, I'm really going to quit. Remember, ordinary men and women changed the world with the gospel in the past history, and they're doing the same thing today. I hope y'all know this. It was World War II and the aftermath of World War II that put over 400 missionaries in the field within 2 or 3, 4, or 5 years overseas. In the very same countries they had been there as soldiers or sailors or airmen. They came back and went to schools like in Abilene, and they prepared themselves and went back to the same world. Why? Because they were there and saw how bad it was. The churches in Okinawa probably was started by this congregation. Iwakuni, Japan. Guam. Just name off the places. So we need to convert more military people and let them go at Sam's expense, Uncle Sam's expense, and establish churches around the world. It has been done. It can be done. So we can do great things. So the question for Ron is, will I carry the flag? Will I be like the little boy painted into some of our paintings of the Civil War and the War of Independence, where they're actually leading the charge, not even with a weapon in their hand. Their weapon is a flag that they would carry at Antietam, Gettysburg, and every other place you can name, which they were still doing in World War I. And I guess after some fashion, I don't know, but it's still that symbol today that will cause people to go beyond now and here for whatever the goal is. So I love y'all with the love of the Lord. But if you need to come to Jesus, today is the day to do it, because today is the only day you and I have. We got right now. So as we're singing this song, if we can help you, would you please come?